Have you ever had that feeling where you're just stuck on overdrive? Like your mind is racing a million miles an hour. There are thoughts everywhere and you just can't rein them in. Or maybe in this same situation, you feel it in your body. Like your chest is tight, you can't take a deep breath, your shoulders are tight, your jaw is tight, you feel this tension everywhere. Or maybe you feel like you can't sit still, like you just need to move or fidget or run or do something. A lot of times in this situation, it's really hard to feel present and it's really hard to relax. Or maybe you've experienced the opposite. Maybe you felt like you're having trouble being present, not because of racing thoughts, but because you're just not here. You're here, but you're not here. You feel kind of numb, kind of spacey, kind of dissociated. Or maybe you feel like you'd like to be more present in your life. You'd like to get out and do things and create the life that you want to be living, but you just can't. You feel stuck. You feel like this lack of motivation, like no matter how much you want to, you just can't. Now, a lot of people, when they hear these things, are going to immediately jump to diagnostic labels, things like anxiety or depression. But what if I told you that all of these symptoms could be explained by your nervous system? And what if I told you that the ticket to overcoming these symptoms might just be a better understanding of how to work with the nervous system? My name is Abby, and for those of you who don't know me, I am a licensed professional counselor, and I specialize in the mind-body connection. And that means that I've spent many hours studying the nervous system and studying all aspects of mind-body health and how our minds and our bodies work together and sometimes work against each other to create the symptoms and the problems that a lot of us struggle with. My goal on this channel is to help people understand their nervous systems and understand this mind-body connection, to help people regain an ability to be present, to be fully themselves, and to feel good again. So today we're going to explore the nervous system and how it impacts mental health. This is the first video in a new series on the nervous system and nervous system regulation and dysregulation and basically everything you need to know about this amazing system inside of your body. And today I'm going to share with you a framework, a concept that could literally change your life. So go ahead and get cozy, get comfortable, grab a blanket, and let's get to it. So first things first, what is the nervous system? We're not going to go too in-depth here today, but I like to describe the nervous system as the physiological hub of the mind-body connection. So our nervous system either directly or indirectly impacts pretty much every system of the body. It has so many jobs. And in general, the nervous system has something to do with most of those things that keep us alive, that keep us functioning. A lot of those processes that we are not thinking about most of the time, but that keep the train running. Things like breathing, things like heart rate, things like digesting our food. But one of the most important roles of the nervous system is controlling our stress response. And that's really where we're going to focus today. So you've probably heard of the fight, flight, freeze response. And if you are a human being, you have experienced this response. In fact, you've probably experienced it at least once today, because this is a ubiquitous response. We go in and out of this all the time, especially in today's age. So essentially what happens is our mind detects a threat. You could think of this as a threat, a challenge, a stressor. It detects something that we need energy, resources to overcome. And that could be an angry bear, or that could be an angry email. So our mind detects this threat or this stressor, and our body says, I've got this. And so all of these physiological changes occur. So we get extra blood rushing to our limbs. That means 1, we can run away faster. 2, we might feel a little jittery and antsy. And 3, you might become aware of your heart beating really fast because it's trying to get blood all the places it needs to go. You might feel a little bit lightheaded, or you might find yourself breathing in a kind of more superficial way because we're trying to pump our body with oxygen. Your muscles might get tight because we are preparing, we're mobilizing them to do something like punch somebody or run. There are so many physiological changes that happen, but the point of those physiological changes is to do some kind of action or movement, usually. The point of the entire stress response is survival. It says there is a threat over there, and we need to do everything we can to overcome that threat. And while you might be really glad of those responses, if you actually did have to deal with a physical threat like a bear, those responses tend to not be so helpful when the threat is an email or sitting in traffic or a minor fight with a roommate or a partner. And since in those examples, we aren't usually physically doing anything with this stress response, we end up feeling symptoms, right? Our stomach might feel upset. We might have trouble taking a deep breath. We might feel pain because our muscles are so tight. And all of these things are usually associated with mental and emotional symptoms as well. So this stress response is associated with the sympathetic branch of the nervous system. And you can remember this by thinking that sympathetic and stress both start with S. So when we perceive a threat, the sympathetic nervous system is dominant and it gives us all of these symptoms. Now there's another system called the parasympathetic system that is kind of the counterbalance to the sympathetic, right? So once we detect that the threat is gone, our parasympathetic nervous system comes in and it brings things back into balance. So if sympathetic is associated with fight or flight, parasympathetic is associated with rest and digest. So it's this state that allows our bodies to do all of the things that we need to do to function properly. I should say to function properly outside of an emergency situation where we might need that sympathetic system. So very simply speaking, sympathetic ramps us up, parasympathetic ramps us down. Now, there are blended states where there's kind of a mix of both things happening, and there are some other fancy things that can happen, but for the sake of this video, remember sympathetic and parasympathetic. So the fight or flight response is meant to be short-lived. It's meant to be something that doesn't happen super often, and it's meant to ramp us up while the threat is present, and then either we die, so it's a moot point, or we've overcome the threat, and then the parasympathetic can come in and ramp us back down. We are meant to spend most of our time in a parasympathetic state. Unfortunately, in this modern age, that's kind of rarely how it works out. A lot of us are having this stress response activated over and over and over and over again all day, every day. And this is causing problems for our minds and our bodies. So in a future video, we'll go a lot more into this chronic stress response and how that can be responsible or kind of a root cause for a lot of different things that can go wrong in the mind and the body. But we'll leave it there for now. And I'm going to show you something that I think is super, super helpful. In fact, I think that this graph can literally be life-changing. Okay, so this is a graph that I designed based on a concept from Dr. Dan Siegel. And this concept is often referred to as the window of tolerance, or sometimes the zone of optimal arousal. So to orient you here, we have 3 different areas on this graph. There are those 2 lines, and the space in between those lines represents what we call the window of tolerance. Above the top line is what we would call hyperarousal, or sometimes just stuck on high. Below the bottom line, we have what's called hypoarousal, or stuck on low. And then that squiggly line in the middle there represents your nervous system arousal. So we're not talking about sexual arousal here, we're talking about activation. So let's start by exploring the window of tolerance. So when you're within your window of tolerance, we would say that you have a regulated nervous system. And this is good news. This is where we want to spend most of our time. I would say that the hallmark symptom, if you want to call it a symptom, of being in your window of tolerance is that you feel like yourself. You feel present. You feel like you're able to use your brain properly, right? Sometimes when we're outside of our window of tolerance, it can feel like things are fuzzy, like we're not making very good decisions, we're acting on our emotions. When you're within the window of tolerance, it's like this perfect balance of emotion and logic. You're able to feel like your full self. Now, common misconception is that being in your window of tolerance means that you are only capable of feeling positive emotions, and that is not true. In our window of tolerance, we can experience a full range of emotions. The key to understanding if you're in your window of tolerance is that it feels like these emotions are not out of control. It feels like you are aware of the emotions, you're able to listen to the emotions, you're able to let the emotions inform your decisions and what's happening. but you're able to control them somewhat, right? So maybe we're feeling a little bit anxious or stressed, but we feel like if we were to do some sort of somatic exercise or breathing exercise or soma song exercise, we would pretty easily be able to feel calm again. Or maybe you're feeling a little bit sluggish, a little bit lethargic, a little bit of, lack of motivation, but it feels like if you were to take some kind of action, it wouldn't be that hard to get you right back into the center of that window of tolerance where you're feeling pretty balanced and good. So balance is really the key word here. Okay, so that's kind of our baseline. But what happens when we cross over that line in either direction? Let's start with hyperarousal. So hyperarousal is a sympathetic nervous system dominant state. Okay, so that stress response, sympathetic and stress start with S, is dominant here. So being stuck in hyperarousal is kind of like being stuck in the fight or flight response. So remember how fight or flight is meant to be quick, short-lived, not lasting very long. Hyperarousal is what happens when we are stuck in that fight or flight response. And so it's associated with what I like to think of as high energy symptoms, those symptoms that are mobilizing you to do something, okay? So in practice, this can look so different for everybody, but think about symptoms that you would associate with high energy. Things like anxiety, things like stress, things like intrusive thoughts, things like feeling triggered, having a panic attack, feeling really scattered, feeling like you need to move, feeling like you're restless, feeling like your thoughts are going a million miles an hour, feeling like you need to engage in some sort of compulsion to manage your anxiety, right? So thinking about different diagnostic categories, we can fit a lot of things in here, but really I'm looking at the symptoms. Our body is stuck in this fight or flight response and our mind is trying to figure out what to do about it. And a lot of times it shows up as this sense of intense urgency. So things that aren't necessarily actually that urgent feel like you have to deal with them right this second, or you can't possibly stop thinking about it or working toward it because it's just so urgent. Now, when we've crossed over the line into hyperarousal, one of the key things that happens is that our prefrontal cortex, so the part of the brain that we think of housing our logic and reason and decision making, the part of our brain that makes us feel like mature adults, stops functioning properly. It kind of sort of goes offline. And then it can kind of feel like our inner child or inner teenager or inner lizard, some people might say, starts to run the show. We stop being as concerned with logic and reason and decision making, and we are acting in survival mode. It is our survival brain that is activated. So particularly the amygdala, which I like to think of as the brain's and the body's alarm system, starts to be super active. So we shift away from long-term big picture thinking and we shift toward immediate survival. Sometimes that shows up as us acting kind of impulsively, or sometimes it shows up in this kind of tunnel vision where it's like the only thing that we can see in that moment is our stress or our anxiety. I know I've been there, and I'm guessing some of you have been there, where it's like you were so stressed about this thing. It felt like the most important, most urgent thing in the world. And then a few hours later, you come out of that and you're like, what was I thinking? That wasn't actually that big of a deal. That is an example of what can happen when we're stuck on high. So before we move on, I just want to give you a quick way of remembering all of this. So stuck on high is also called hyperarousal. Hyper, you can think of hyperactive, high energy, okay? So hyperarousal is kind of like a hyperactive nervous system. High energy, stuck on high, hyperaroused. If we go all the way to the bottom of the graph, we get hypoarousal, or stuck on low. And I remember that one by thinking that low and hypo kind of rhyme. Hypo, stuck on low. Now, as you might have guessed, hypoarousal is associated with low energy symptoms and emotions. I like to think of this as kind of like battery saving mode on a phone. If we put this into the language of fight, flight, freeze, a lot of people think this is going to be freeze, but it's not. It's actually the collapse response. So if you think about a possum that plays dead, it assesses the threat and it decides, okay, I can't run away fast enough and there's no way that I can take that thing. I'm just going to collapse and pretend to be dead and hope that it leaves me alone. That's hypoarousal. It's a collapse response. Hypoarousal is typically a response that happens when our system has become totally overwhelmed, either because of the magnitude of the stress or the threat. So a lot of times this happens in trauma. Or it can be because of chronic stress. It can be because our system is so depleted that we just get burned out, right? So burnout is what I associate with hypoarousal as well. So in more extreme cases, we can get kind of dissociation, feeling like you're outside of your body, feeling like you're not really present, feeling like you're numb and spacey. And that doesn't happen in all cases of hypoarousal, but sometimes I think about that as like your mind and body feeling like the threat is so big, the stressor is so big that the best thing that it can do for you is kind of numb you out so you don't feel the pain. So it's really not very healthy or feasible for our bodies to sustain a hyper-aroused response for super long. So what I see a lot in my practice is people who historically have been hyper-aroused. Maybe they have a lot of anxiety, maybe they have a trauma background and they're constantly triggered into a hyper-aroused response. Maybe they have a really demanding job or life and they're just chronically stressed, or for whatever reason, they're stuck on high a lot. But then they hit a point where their body can't sustain that anymore. And so either they go and they overcompensate, and by they, I mean their nervous system overcompensates, and then they get stuck on low in this kind of hypo-aroused response, or there's kind of a bouncing between. So stuck on high, stuck on low, stuck on high, stuck on low, sometimes within the same day or even within the course of a few hours. So when I see somebody who says they have both anxiety and depression, this is not the only explanation, but my mind immediately jumps to that alternating pattern, stuck on high, stuck on low. So again, symptoms of stuck on low are feeling lack of motivation, feeling like it's hard to get out of bed or hard to do the things you need to do, procrastination, feeling depressed, feeling hopeless, feeling down, feeling a lot of shame, feeling like you're kind of beating yourself up, feeling stuck, feeling just exhausted, like chronic fatigue might be associated in some cases with stuck on low. Sometimes brain fog can be associated with stuck on low. And a lot of times people really beat themselves up for being here, right? They call themselves lazy. They say that they should just get up and do stuff. And really, I'd like to invite you to have a little more compassion for yourself if you're in this state and that's how you're feeling, because you can't outthink your nervous system. Just like you can't say, oh, well, you should just calm down if you're stuck on high. Be like, gee, thanks, that's great advice. I'll just calm down now, right? It's the same thing with stuck on low. You can't just think your way out of it. In order to regulate out of these responses, we need tools that work directly with the nervous system. And that is the missing piece in so many people's physical and mental health. Those tools that directly target the nervous system. So the entire point of me making this video and this channel and my method is that I'm here to give you tools that directly work with your nervous system. That's what Soma Song is. Soma Song is a tool that was designed by me, an expert in nervous system regulation and the mind-body connection, to help people overcome these patterns. But the reason I'm making this series is because in order to use these nervous system regulating tools effectively, we have to understand our nervous system. And we have to be able to recognize which state of the nervous system we're in, hence the importance of this graph, which we'll get into more in a future episode. Because it's really important to use appropriate tools. When you're stuck on high, you need to use tools that are going to help you regulate down. When you're stuck on low, you need to use tools that are actually going to activate you a little bit and help you come back up into the window of tolerance. And if you're in your window of tolerance, that's a whole different ballgame as well. So I invite you to start using this concept and this graph to really think about where your nervous system is at any given time. If you're feeling a little bit off, ask yourself, where would I put myself in this graph? And start to notice and start to see how it changes things. So throughout this channel, I'm going to be providing practice along videos. I'm going to be providing full-length classes. I'm going to be providing education. I'll be providing all kinds of things. But really the most effective way to learn this protocol and this method is through my course. So I'm in the process of creating a course that shows you everything you need to know about regulating your nervous system with Soma Song. And if you'd like to be one of the first people to get in on this course, please click the link in the description box below to join my waitlist. And I will give you information as soon as the course is ready for you. It should be very soon. And if you're not sure you want to go for the course yet, but you do want something a little more, I invite you to join my Substack community. Community is super important for healing. And so I'm trying to create a supportive community of like-minded individuals all on this journey of healing our nervous systems together. And I would love it if you would join. So you'll find that link in the description box below as well. So next time in this series, we are going to be talking about the freeze response. We talked about fight, flight, and collapse. What the heck is freeze? You'll learn next week. So I hope this was helpful for you, and I look forward to seeing you next time.